A busy, compressed world of clinking glasses, rowdy chatter, and the heavy scent of spirits downstairs, while just above the floorboards a young family is growing, and elderly in-laws are finding a quiet corner to rest. This was the Albion Tavern in Dalston in 1871, and at the centre of it all was a man named John Harkom. But if you had tried to find John just a few years earlier, he would have seemed like a ghost, completely vanished from the historical record. His life is a story of two very distinct halves, a well-documented decade of success in London and a nearly lost youth in Somerset that was almost erased by a single frustrating clerical error. Stick around to find out how the name Harkness was the key to unlocking the whole mystery, and I'll be explaining why a £300 court case might be the only glimpse we have into his missing 20 years. Today we are exploring the life of John Harkom. Please remember to give this video the thumbs up, and if you like the content and want more, hit the subscribe button and tap that notification bell. Our story begins with a snapshot taken on the 2nd of April 1871. John Harkom gives his age as 46 years old, a licensed victualler and wine merchant, living above his tavern with his pregnant wife Mary Ann and their 4 young children. It's a bustling household. Even Mary Ann's parents, both in their 70s, are living there. To all appearances, John is a man of substance, a respectable member of the London trade. But when we look closer at his death certificate just a few months later, the cracks in the timeline begin to show. He was reported as 47 when he died, but the evidence suggests he may actually have been 50. This might seem like a small detail, but in Victorian genealogy, these tiny discrepancies are often the breadcrumbs that lead us deeper. To find John's origins, we have to head west to Somerset, to the parish of Walcott in Bath. He was born there around 1821 to another John Harkom, who is variously described as a shoemaker and a gardener. We have a link thanks to a baptism register at St Swithin's, Walcott, dated the 22nd of April 1821. But here is where the mystery deepens. When we searched the 1841 census for a John Harkom in Bath, we initially came up empty-handed. It turns out he was mistranscribed as John Harkness. It's a classic example of how easily an ordinary working man can slip from view because of a simple error. Without recognising that Harkness was actually our Harkom family, a conclusion gaining some support from DNA testing, his entire early life would have remained a blank. And just a rider to cover my bases, it is possible that John Harkom, christened in 1821, died in infancy, and another son was born a couple of years later, and, as was common, was named after his now dead brother. This might explain some of the age confusion, but there are no christening or burial records to promote this conjecture. That age confusion is not uncommon, even when dates are now certain, and in any case we would still be looking at the same family, so we're talking about the right things. But after 1841, the trail goes cold for over 20 years. John completely disappears from the 1851 and 1861 censuses. Now, we don't know for certain why. Perhaps the records were lost, or maybe he was living in a lodging house where the names were recorded so poorly they have evaded every search. But with a surname as uncommon as his was, there is a tantalising glimpse of someone that might be our John in November 1862. A John Harkom pursued a case at the Marlborough Street Police Court in central London regarding a £300 investment loss. If this is our man, and it fits the timeline perfectly, it places him in the heart of London and in an area where the 1861 census records are missing. 2 years before his marriage, likely working his way up in the licensed trade. It's the kind of transition many Somerset men made, seeking the vast opportunities of the capital. By 1864, John was ready to more clearly appear and make his mark. On the 17th of May, he married Mary Ann Cook at St Andrew, Holborn. He was already describing himself as a licensed victualler, and he didn't waste any time. Within just 6 weeks of the wedding, he had taken over the licence of the Albion Tavern from a man named William Ledger. This rapid move suggests John wasn't a novice. He likely had his foot in the door of the trade for some time, although this is the only establishment he is known to have been the proprietor of. He also started styling himself as John Lewis Harkom in his children's baptismal records. It's a small touch, but it hints at a man who is very attentive to his presentation and professional respectability. In a trade where your reputation was everything, that middle name added a certain genteel weight to his character. John's marriage was short, lasting only 7 years and 6 months, but it was incredibly productive. He and Mary Ann had 5 children: George Lewis, William James, Carrie Louisa, Emily Bertha, and Alice Mary. Sadly, John never met that last child. John wasn't just a father, though. He was a provider for the whole extended family, taking in his ageing in-laws during their final years. He built a life of stability and modest success, eventually leaving an estate valued at a little under £2,000. Now, that wasn't wealth on a grand scale, but it was a respectable sum that showed he had successfully navigated the jump from a shoemaker's house in Bath to a middle-class existence in London. But the year 1871, which had begun with that busy snapshot of tavern life, turned into a year of compounded tragedy. On the 3rd of April, just one day after the census was taken, Mary Ann's father died at the Albion. 8 months later, on the 8th of December, John followed him. He was only 50 years old. His death certificate lists emphysema of lungs and a dilated heart. These weren't sudden illnesses. They were chronic conditions that had likely been straining his heart for years, perhaps a side effect of a lifetime spent in the smoky atmosphere of Victorian London. He was buried in a public grave at Abney Park Cemetery, leaving Mary Ann pregnant with their 5th child and suddenly responsible for the entire family business. John Harkom's life reminds us how fragile our history can be. He wasn't a famous figure, just a determined man who worked hard to sustain his family and build a legacy. Yet through careful comparison, the elimination of other candidates, and even a DNA match that supports the family links, his outline has become clearer. From a youth who seemed to be hiding in Bath to the respected keeper of the Albion Tavern, the thread of his life holds firm. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about John's journey from the shadows into the light. Before I leave you, a massive thank you to those of you clicking the like button. It is always appreciated. Let me know in the comments what you think of John's missing 20 years, and until next time, keep exploring. What is black and white and red all over? A newspaper, of course. I knew before starting this video that it would be a challenge, partly my inexperience, but more than that, there is very little documentation on John Harkom or his life, as will have been evident. But I wanted to see what I could do, and there were several times, as I had researched John, that contemporary newspapers shone a light, however dimly, into his and his family's situation. A valuable tool in this endeavour that suggests future generations may love archive.org.